The fluorescent lights above me were merciless bright beams cutting through the fog of my fading consciousness. I could feel nothing except the heavy weight pressing on my chest and the sting of air being forced into my lungs. Somewhere close by, a monitor screamed with a single shrill tone, that long, flat sound that means the heart has stopped. My body lay stiff on the gurney in the emergency room of St. Mary's Hospital in Rochester, Minnesota. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, the kind of hour when most of the world is asleep, but for me, it was the hour when everything broke open. I heard shoes squeaking across polished floors, voices rising in urgent command, and then a nurse shouted words that should have been final. "She's dead." The sentence cracked through the room like lightning. For 2 full minutes, I had been gone. The flat line on the screen had already begun to feel like a verdict. Hands pressed into my chest with brutal rhythm. A voice near my ear said clear shock now. My body jolted as electricity coursed through me, but nothing came back. Again, shock. Another jolt. The beeping monitor gave a weak blip, faltered, then silence again. My lips were cracked from the cold still clinging to me, my hair damp with frost, my fingers bloodied from clawing at a door that would not open. In the haze between life and death, I could hear fragments Dr. Hartman telling the team, "We cannot give up." Nurse Kelly gasping, "She's just 19." The words reached my ears as if through water. They were fighting for me, but they did not know the truth. They did not know that what had dragged me to the edge of death was not an accident, not some unfortunate fall into the snow, but the cruelty of the people who were supposed to be family. I felt my chest cave under the relentless rhythm of compressions. My ribs ached as though splintered my skin, burning under defibrillator pads. My heart refused to start. I floated somewhere above my body, hearing them say her pulse is gone. Prepare another shock. A third surge tore through me, snapping me back, my chest heaving, the monitor stuttering with a fragile beat. A gasp ripped from my throat, sharp, painful, unwilling, but alive. Against all odds, against medical probability, I was back. I wanted to believe that surviving was enough. I wanted to believe that coming back from the dead made me safe. But as I lay there with oxygen strapped to my face and lines running into my veins, the thought that thundered louder than the machines was simple. I should not have been here in the first place. My death had been written hours earlier in the snow behind the Carter house. The ER felt colder than the blizzard outside. Every bruise showed under the sterile lights, blue patches across my arms, where I had been gripped and dragged, abrasions on my knuckles from pounding until skin split open. Nurses rushed around their hands quick, their words clipped, but I was not only fighting hypothermia. I was fighting the silence that had trapped me for years. Lying on that hospital bed, I realized my story could no longer stay hidden. I had been silent while they mocked me silent, while they controlled me silent, while they chipped away at my worth. That night, the silence had nearly killed me. I heard the doctor's voice near my ear, steady but shaken. She was gone for 2 minutes. Survival like this almost never happens. His words tolled like a funeral bell, and yet I was breathing again. I was breathing to tell the truth. You see, when the nurse shouted, "She's dead," I heard it too. For a moment, I believed it. Darkness had closed over me, and I felt the strange calm of letting go. Images flashed like lightning, my father's smile when he took me for ice cream at Silver Lake Park, the warmth of summers before he died, the laughter of children I used to envy. Then just as suddenly came the echo of voices sharper than any wind. Donna's cold command. "Apologize to your brother." Alex's rage. "You think you are better than me." Those were the voices that had chased me into the snow and locked me out of life. The doctors kept working. Warm fluids pumped into me, blankets piled high, hands refusing to surrender me to the cold. My pulse was faint, but present, a candle flickering in the storm. I opened my eyes, just a slit, and the glare stabbed into me. Above me leaned Nurse Kelly, her face streaked with sweat. "You're back," she whispered, disbelief mixed with relief. I wanted to tell her that she did not know half the story. I wanted to tell her that being dragged out of the storm was only part of the truth. At 3 o'clock that morning, the machines declared me a miracle. But miracles come with responsibility. I could not let what happened be buried under polite lies. My body had been left in the snow until life drained out, and my stepbrother had done it with my stepmother's approval. That knowledge was heavier than the oxygen mask pressing my face. The ER team finally stepped back, their shoulders slumping, their eyes wide. Against the odds, the girl declared gone had returned. I closed my eyes again, tears seeping from the corners mixing with the frost that still clung to my hair. I whispered into the mask my words so faint that only the nurse closest to me heard. "They tried to kill me." The words froze the air in the room more than the winter outside. Dr. Hartman leaned in, his eyes piercing mine. "Do you understand that you survived what should not be survivable?" I nodded weakly. I understood more than he could imagine. For 19 years, I had been invisible in my own home. At 3 in the morning on that hospital bed, I became something else. I was the girl who had been dragged into the snow and left for dead, who had flatlined under the fluorescent lights, who had clawed her way back. And I was no longer silent. This is not only the story of how I died for 2 minutes in the cold. This is the story of why. When people ask what nearly ended me, they expect the answer to be something extraordinary. They imagine a car accident on an icy road, a fire that spread too fast to freak mistake. They never expect soup. They never expect a simple dinner inside a quiet suburban house in Rochester, Minnesota, on a bitter January evening. But that was where everything started. It was just after 7 o'clock, and the snow had been falling steadily since late afternoon. The windows of our kitchen fogged from the steam of the pot simmering on the stove. I had always found small comfort in cooking. Even in that house where every word I spoke was twisted and every effort dismissed, the kitchen gave me a fragile sense of control. That night, I stirred, carefully tasting and adjusting a touch of cayenne to cut through the heaviness of winter. I thought if the flavor was balanced enough, maybe no one would find fault. Alex Carter. My stepbrother was already prowling around the table like a restless wolf. At 22, he carried the swagger of someone who believed the world owed him deference. He had the body of a linebacker, broad-shouldered, tall and heavy, but his presence was more dangerous than his build. His temper filled every corner of the room. He was the golden child in Donna Carter's eyes, my stepmother, the one who could do no wrong. He drank from a beer bottle, slamming it down so hard that the silverware rattled. I ladled soup into bowls, careful with my movements. My fingers shook as I placed one in front of him. Please let it be fine, I thought. Please let tonight be uneventful. Alex took one spoonful, chewed with exaggerated disgust, and spat it straight into the sink. "What is this garbage?" His voice thundered through the house. I froze. "It's just chicken soup," I whispered. His eyes narrowed, a cruel smile curving across his lips. "This is poison. You trying to kill me with spice?" Before I could answer, Donna walked in from the living room. Her hair was perfectly styled as always. Her nails painted a cold shade of mauve. She looked me over the way someone might look at a stain on the carpet. "What now?" she sighed. "She put cayenne in this?" Alex snapped, waving his spoon like evidence in a trial. "She thinks she can get away with anything." I shook my head quickly. "It's just a little warmth for winter. It's not too spicy." Donna's eyes hardened. "Apologize to your brother Hannah." The words struck me harder than his shout. She didn't ask if I was right. She didn't taste it herself. She didn't even pretend to care. In that house, my existence was the crime, and everything else was just supporting evidence. My throat tightened. "I don't think I did anything wrong," I said softly, almost to myself. The refusal lit a fire in Alex's face. He shoved his chair back with a screech. "You think you're better than me now? You think you get to talk back?" I could feel the blood drain from my face. I looked to Donna, desperate for even a flicker of defense, but she only folded her arms. Her lips curved in that cold half-smile I had seen so many times. "Maybe she needs to learn a lesson," she murmured. The room seemed to tilt. A wave of dread crashed over me, icy and certain. When Donna said those words, it meant Alex had free rein. He grabbed my wrist in a grip like iron. The bowl I had been holding slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile broth, splattering across my shoes. I gasped, trying to pull back, but his strength was overwhelming. "Alex, please," I whispered. But he didn't hear me. Or maybe he did and simply enjoyed the sound of my pleading. He dragged me through the kitchen past the counter where steam still rose from the soup pot, past the living room where the television flickered with muted news reports. Donna followed slowly, glass of wine in her hand, as calm as if we were walking to set the table. The back door creaked open and the howl of the Minnesota winter swept inside. The cold was immediate, a knife against my cheeks, stealing my breath. Snowflakes whipped in on the wind, clinging to my sweater. Alex yanked me outside onto the porch. The snow was already several inches deep, crunching beneath our feet. I stumbled, nearly falling, but his grip tightened, bruising bone. "You think you're going to disrespect me in my house?" His spit flew into the night air, freezing almost instantly. "It's not your house," I managed to say, voice trembling. "It was my father's." That was enough. His eyes flared with something wild. He shoved me hard, and I fell onto the snow, the cold searing through my thin clothes. I gasped, the breath knocked out of me, the ice burning my palms. Behind him, Donna stood framed in the warm glow of the house. Her silhouette was calm, motionless. She raised her glass to her lips and said almost lazily, "Maybe this will finally teach her." The door slammed shut. The click of the lock echoed in my ears louder than any thunder. I scrambled up, pounding on the door. "Please, Donna, please!" My voice broke into sobs. "Alex, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." The only reply was silence. The wind cut through me fierce and unrelenting. My breath turned to clouds that disappeared instantly. I hugged myself, shivering, looking around at the yard, swallowed by white. Beyond the fence, the neighborhood was silent, blanketed in storm. No one could hear me. The snow clung to my lashes, blurred my vision. My knees trembled as the cold crept into my bones. I slammed my fists against the door until skin split and blood mingled with frost. But the house stayed dark and unmoved. That was the moment I knew. They were not going to open the door. They were not going to let me back inside. In their eyes, I was no longer family. I was disposable. I sank to the ground again, snow soaking through my jeans, the cold, a merciless thief, stealing warmth cell by cell. The soup I had made hours earlier still simmered on the stove, but I was outside, my life traded for cayenne, and somewhere inside the locked house, Donna probably smiled while Alex laughed. I whispered to the night, to no one, "This is how I die." The storm answered with silence. But the night was only beginning. When people saw me outside that night, they saw only a girl left in the snow. But the truth is, the cold had been creeping into my life for years. Long before that January storm, I had already been trained to accept silence as survival. The snow was just the final chapter of a story that began when I was a child in Rochester, back when my father was still alive. My father, Michael Miller, was the only person who ever looked at me as if I mattered. He worked as a mechanic in town hands, always rough from tools, clothes, smelling faintly of motor oil. On weekends, he would take me to Silver Lake Park. We would buy ice cream from a small stand and sit by the water watching geese drift by. I was his shadow, always trailing behind, always safe in his warmth. But he died when I was 11, a sudden heart attack that left me standing in a too-bright hospital corridor, clutching Donna's hand because there was no one else. Donna had married my father just a few years earlier. At first, she was polite, her voice sweet as sugar when he was around. After he died, the sweetness evaporated. She moved through the house like it was her kingdom, every word a decree. She told me I should be grateful she was even keeping me under her roof. She told me my father spoiled me, and now it was her job to correct me. Her son, Alex Carter, was 4 years older than me. From the beginning, Donna made it clear he was the golden child. He was praised for things as small as picking up his shoes while I was criticized for folding laundry the wrong way. If he slammed a door, Donna called it passion. If I raised my voice, she called it disrespect. If he hit me, she told me not to provoke him. I remember being 10 years old, coming home from school with a drawing I had made. It was a picture of our house colored in with care, my father's car in the driveway. I ran to show Alex, hoping maybe he would be proud. He snatched it from my hands, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into the trash. When I cried, Donna scolded me. "Stop tattling on your brother Hannah. You need to learn not to provoke him." That phrase became the refrain of my life. At 14, I begged to go to a school dance at Century High. I had already bought a second-hand dress with babysitting money. Donna took one look and said, "You're not going. Someone has to cook dinner." That night, I stayed home in the kitchen while Alex went out with friends. I listened to music muffled through the walls while I stirred soup, the scent of garlic clinging to me instead of perfume. At 17, during a family barbecue, Alex grew angry because I hadn't refilled his drink fast enough. He snapped a spatula in half and hurled the sharp edge at me. It cut a thin line across my arm. Relatives laughed it off as rough play, and Donna shook her head as if I was dramatic. I went inside, pressing paper towels to the wound, and whispered into the mirror, "You are not crazy. You are not crazy." That was the hardest part, the gaslighting. It wasn't only the bruises or the cuts, it was the silence that followed the way everyone acted like nothing happened. Donna would hum while folding laundry, Alex would watch television, and I would sit alone in my room, clutching my arms, telling myself my pain was real, even if no one acknowledged it. I learned to hide bruises under long sleeves, even in summer. I learned to cook enough food to keep Alex quiet, though he always found fault. I learned that speaking up brought punishment, while silence at least kept the peace. By the time I was 18, I didn't think of myself as a daughter or a sister. I was a servant. Donna liked to remind me of it. She would say, "Without us, you'd be nothing. No one else would want you." Those words sank into me like ice. Sometimes I believed her. Yet inside, a small rebellion grew. Each insult planted a seed. Each shove watered it. Each cold glance nourished it. I began writing secret notes in a journal I hid under my mattress. They were not long entries, just small affirmations. "You are Hannah Miller. You exist. You are not worthless. You deserve to live." Those words became anchors when the storm of daily life threatened to pull me under. There were moments I almost escaped. At 19, I filled out half of a college application for a culinary program in Minneapolis. I saved coins from babysitting, tucking them into an envelope. One evening, Donna found it. She tore the application in front of me, shredded the envelope, and hissed, "You would abandon your family after all we've done for you. Without us, you are nothing." The pieces fluttered into the trash like broken wings. I told myself maybe she was right, so I stayed. When I got a part-time job at a cafe downtown, I felt like I could breathe. The clink of cups, the smell of coffee, the chatter of customers, it was a world where I was not just the scapegoat. But Alex came storming in one night, dragging me out by the arm in front of coworkers. Donna told the manager I was irresponsible, that Alex was only protecting me. I lost the job the next day. Independence was not allowed. I began to understand that my survival was not accidental. It was structured. Alex's violence grew more predictable as he aged, while Donna's manipulation grew sharper. He would explode, she would excuse, and I would bear the cost. It was a system designed to keep me silent. At night, I would sit at my window staring at the snow falling over Rochester and whisper into the glass, "You are not crazy. You are Hannah Miller." But deep down, I feared they were preparing me for something worse, some final act. I was right. That winter night proved it. The soup was never about spice. It was about control. It was about a system that had been in place since I was a child, each moment building toward the moment Alex dragged me into the storm and Donna closed the door. The snow was not my first prison. It was only the most visible. By the time the storm reached its peak that January night, the temperature had plunged below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind screamed through the bare trees, shaking the branches against the windows like fists. Snow whipped across the yard in waves, erasing footprints within seconds. Inside the Carter house, warmth glowed from lamps, and the scent of soup still lingered in the air. But I was no longer part of that warmth. I was standing on the edge of something much colder, and I knew it. Alex's grip on my wrist tightened until my bones ached. He had already dragged me across the kitchen and through the back door, and now he yanked me down the porch steps into the yard. The snow swallowed my shoes, seeping through the thin fabric until my toes went numb. My sweater clung damp against my skin, no match for the icy gusts that cut through me like knives. Alex, please, I begged, stumbling to keep up as he pulled me toward the back fence. It's just soup. It's not poison. He laughed, a sound without humor, a sound that chilled me more than the storm. You think you can serve me trash and get away with it? You think you can defy me in front of her? He jerked his head toward the house where Donna stood framed in the kitchen window, glass of wine in her hand, watching as though this was nothing more than a show. I called out to her, desperation cracking my voice. Donna, please, tell him to stop. She raised her glass slightly, lips curling into a faint smile. Maybe this will finally teach her. Then she closed the curtain. The gesture was as final as a slammed coffin lid. My knees buckled not from the cold, but from the realization. There would be no rescue. Not from her. Alex shoved me hard, and I fell into the snow, the impact knocking the air from my lungs. I gasped, clawing at the ground, trying to push myself up, but the snow was slick and heavy. He towered above me, his breath fogging in the icy air. You've always thought you were better than me, he sneered, always looking at me like I was the problem. Well, tonight you'll learn. He turned, stomped back to the porch, and slammed the door shut. The lock clicked into place. The sound echoed through the yard, sealing my fate. I staggered to my feet, pounding on the back door with numb fists. Please, let me in. My voice broke into sobs. I'm sorry. I'll fix the soup. I'll do anything. No answer. Only the howl of the storm. I ran to the window, pressing my face to the glass, hoping Donna would meet my eyes, but the curtain stayed drawn, the kitchen light glowing faintly behind it, mocking me. Snow clung to my lashes, freezing into crystals that blurred my vision. I pressed my hands against the door until the skin split and smeared red across the white frost. My chest heaved, breath coming in ragged bursts. Already my legs trembled, muscles seizing against the cold. Minutes felt like hours. The storm showed no mercy. My fingers stiffened, the sensation draining from them as if stolen by invisible thieves. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold in warmth, but it leaked away faster than I could cling to it. I thought of my father then, of the nights he tucked me in with an extra blanket and kissed my forehead, saying, "Stay warm, little one." He had kept the cold away, not just the winter, but the coldness of life. Without him, there was nothing to shield me. I stumbled across the yard, searching for shelter. The shed loomed in the corner, its door locked with a rusted padlock. I rattled it until my wrists burned, but it would not open. My voice cracked as I screamed into the storm. Somebody, please! But no one answered. The snow grew heavier, pressing down on me like a weight. I collapsed near the porch steps, my body curling instinctively to conserve what little heat remained. My teeth chattered so hard I thought they might break. Each inhale burned my lungs, the air so frigid it felt like swallowing shards of glass. I pressed my forehead against the wooden step, tears freezing before they could fall. I wanted to believe this was temporary, that Alex would laugh and open the door, that Donna would tire of her performance and let me back inside. But the minutes stretched and no footsteps came. No voices called my name. The realization struck with brutal clarity. They meant to leave me there. They meant for the storm to finish what they had started. My mind twisted between panic and numbness. One moment I pounded weakly on the steps, the next, I lay still too tired to move. The wind roared in my ears, carrying fragments of memory. Laughter from a barbecue when relatives had watched Alex throw things at me. Donna's voice saying, "Without us, you are nothing." The slam of doors, the sting of insults, the long nights of silence. It had all been building to this moment. The storm did not care about justice. The snow covered everything, erasing my struggle, burying me inch by inch. I curled tighter, my breath shallow, whispering into the night. Is this how it ends? In the cold, invisible. No answer came. Only the relentless howl of Minnesota winter. But just as the darkness pressed closer, faint hope flickered at the edges of my mind. Somewhere beyond the fence, a light shone faintly from the neighbor's window. Somewhere out there someone might hear. I clung to that thought as my body trembled uncontrollably, praying that the storm would not silence me completely before help arrived. The snow was not just cold anymore. It was alive, seeping into me cell by cell, a thief stealing from the inside. My body shook so violently I could hardly control it. Then the shivering slowed until I knew that was even worse. I curled tighter on the ground, arms wrapped around myself, and my breath came out in ragged clouds that vanished instantly in the air. At first, I fought. I pounded weakly against the steps of the porch, hoping the sound would reach Donna through the walls, but my fists barely made a thud. My hands were red and raw skin torn from the wood, but I could not feel the pain anymore. My fingers had gone numb. Stiff claws curled against my palms. Then came the memories. They rose, unbidden flashes of light in the darkness. I was 9 years old again, sitting beside my father at Silver Lake Park, the sun warm on my shoulders as I licked melting ice cream before it dripped down my wrist. I heard his laugh rich and comforting, saying, "Don't worry, little one, you'll always be safe with me." But his voice faded, replaced by Donna's sharper tone. "You are nothing without us." Her words clamped around me like chains. The contrast was unbearable, the sweetness of what I lost, twisting into the cruelty of what remained. My body spasmed with another wave of cold. My teeth clattered, my chest ached. Each breath felt heavier than the last. I pressed my face into the snow, the sting sharp, and for a moment I almost welcomed it. Maybe it would be easier to let go. But then another memory struck. I was 15, standing in our kitchen, secretly watching a cooking show on an old laptop. The chef sprinkled herbs with flair, describing how food could heal, how flavors could tell stories. For a second, I had imagined myself there in a kitchen where no one yelled, no one judged, where meals brought joy. That dream had lived in me, fragile but bright. The storm whispered back, "You will never have that. You are meant for silence." My eyes grew heavy. The world blurred snow, swirling into shadows. I thought I saw Alex's face leaning over me, his grin triumphant. "See? You can't even fight back," he jeered. Then Donna's voice cool and detached. "This will teach her." Their words twisted through the night until I could not tell what was real and what was memory. The fire of hypothermia came next. It was the cruelest trick. My skin, frozen for so long, began to burn as if flames licked across it. I tore at my sweater, confused, my body convinced I was hot, while the snow piled higher around me. My breath rasped, shallow and slow, and I knew in some distant corner of my mind this was the final stage. I whispered into the storm, barely forming the words. Would anyone care if I never came back? My voice cracked into silence. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched like hours. The darkness pressed closer, but just before it swallowed me, another sound pierced through. A faint creak of a door, the crunch of boots across snow. My ears strained. On the other side of the fence, a light flickered on in the Green family's garage. Evelyn Green was a widow in her 60s who had lived next door for decades. She had always been kind in passing, offering cookies at Christmas, waving from her garden in summer. I had never told her the truth about what happened in our house. Now her presence was the only thread left holding me to life. I thought I heard her voice, faintly muffled by the storm. "Harold, do you hear that?" She still spoke sometimes to her late husband. "Something's wrong." I wanted to scream, to shout, but my voice was trapped inside me. My lips barely moved, the sound no louder than the wind. Still, some instinct made me press my bleeding knuckles against the wooden step one more time. Thud! Thud! Evelyn's steps grew closer on the other side of the fence. "That sound," she murmured. "It's not the storm. It's alive." She hesitated, then turned back toward her house. A moment later, I saw the glow of her phone through the blur of snow. She was calling. She was dialing 911. Relief flooded me, but my body was too far gone to respond. I collapsed fully into the snow, my face, half-buried eyes slipping shut. Somewhere. Faintly, I heard the operator's distant voice through the storm as Evelyn said, "My neighbor girl, she's out there. She's not moving." The darkness surged again, pulling me under. In the haze, I saw my father's face one last time, warm and smiling, his hand reaching for mine. I wanted to take it to sink into the comfort. But another voice echoed louder, my own voice from the journal I had hidden under my mattress. "You are Hannah Miller. You deserve to live." That thought clung to me even as the cold wrapped tighter. The sirens were far off. Maybe not even real, but I thought I heard them. I thought I heard the world rushing toward me, refusing to let me disappear. And then there was nothing at all. When I woke again, I was not in the snow. I was under light, blinding, sterile light that seared through my eyelids even though I could barely lift them. At first, I thought it was a dream that I was still lying in the yard outside our house, and the storm had simply shifted into a bright white blur. Then sound returned. The pounding of feet across polished floors, the clatter of instruments on trays, voices sharp and overlapping. "She's freezing core temperature dangerously low," a man barked, pulse barely there. Another voice said, "Prepare the crash cart." The words swirled in my ears too fast to catch, but one phrase broke through the fog. "She's gone." It was Nurse Kelly Johnson, her voice trembling despite its practiced urgency. Flatline. No response. My chest was heavy as if bricks had been stacked on top of me. My lungs refused to inflate. I wanted to scream to tell them I was still there, but my body betrayed me. I was trapped in silence, floating somewhere between existence and nothing. Then came the shock. Clear, a voice cut sharp as lightning. My body arched violently, pain exploding through my chest. A crackle of electricity tore me from the edge, then dropped me again. Beep, beep, flatline. The sound stretched unbroken. Again, another shock. My vision flickered with blue sparks. For 1 second, I thought I had surfaced, that maybe I would breathe again. But then, darkness yawned wide, pulling me under. "She's not coming back," someone muttered. I heard the words as if through water, "not coming back." But then another voice, firm and unyielding, broke through. "No, not yet. Not this girl." It was Dr. Stephen Hartman, the ER physician. I couldn't see him, but I felt the force of his will pressing against the void. Charge again. 200 joules. The third shock slammed into me. My chest convulsed. My mouth opened in a soundless cry. For a terrifying second, nothing. Then beep, beep, beep. The monitor stuttered, faltered, then found rhythm. "She's back." Nurse Johnson gasped, weak but back. A rush of hands worked over me. Warm blankets cocooned my frozen limbs. Fluids coursed through veins that barely remembered warmth. Oxygen pressed against my face, forcing breath into lungs that had almost forgotten how to move. I floated between pain and relief, between terror and the fragile spark of life. I opened my eyes a fraction. The ceiling swam above me, fluorescent panels harsh and unforgiving. Dr. Hartman leaned close, sweat beading on his brow, his expression etched with both exhaustion and triumph. "You shouldn't be alive," he whispered, not to discourage me, but in awe. "But you are." A tear slipped from the corner of my eye. It was too much, too fast, too impossible. I had been gone. I had felt it, and yet here I was, tethered to life again by wires and willpower. But even in that moment of fragile survival, the truth burned hotter than any IV fluid. This was not an accident. This was not bad luck. I had been left to die. I wanted to tell him. My lips trembled beneath the oxygen mask. "They tried to kill me." The words scraped raw across my throat, barely audible, but Nurse Johnson froze her eyes wide. She glanced at Dr. Hartman, who nodded gravely. "Noted," he said softly. "Rest now. There will be time. Rest." The word felt foreign. For years, rest had been denied me through insults, through chores, through endless gaslighting. Now, even in this moment of reprieve, I knew rest would not be enough. Surviving was no longer enough. The hours blurred. I drifted in and out of consciousness, waking to find nurses checking my vitals, heating pads pressed against my hands, voices murmuring that my heart was still weak but beating. Each time I surfaced, I thought of the snow of Alex's smirk as he shut the door of Donna's cold silhouette, raising her wine glass. The more my body thawed, the sharper my mind became. Rage kindled where numbness had been. They wanted me gone. They wanted me silent. But fate, or maybe sheer stubbornness, had given me another chance. By dawn, the storm outside had softened. Through the narrow hospital window, I could see snow piled high along the curbs of Rochester glowing faintly in the pale light. I had survived the night that should have ended me. Dr. Hartman returned to check my chart. He studied me for a long moment, then said, "Do you understand how close it was?" I nodded weakly. 2 minutes, I whispered. "I heard you." His eyes widened. I remember enough." My voice was thin but steady. He placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "That's extraordinary. Most people don't come back. But you did. Don't waste this chance." His words rooted deep in me. They weren't just medical advice. They were a command. Don't waste this chance. As the monitors beeped steadily beside me, I made a silent vow. I would not let them bury me in silence again. I would not let Donna rewrite the story or Alex laugh away the truth. The cold had almost claimed me, but it had also burned something into me, a new fire that no storm could extinguish. I was not just a girl who had almost died in the snow. I was Hannah Miller. I was still here, and I would make sure the world knew why. The morning after I was pulled back from the edge, the hospital room was quiet. Machines hummed beside me, steady mechanical heartbeats that tethered me to life. My body was still weak, wrapped in layers of heated blankets, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. Every beep of the monitor, every ache in my chest was proof that I had been given something rare a second chance. I told myself I wouldn't waste it. When the door opened, I thought it was another nurse, but it was Donna. She swept in with her coat draped neatly across her shoulders, her perfume sharp, her smile carefully arranged for the staff passing in the hallway. Behind her came Alex, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. He looked around the room as if he owned it. Hannah Donna said, her voice honeyed for the first time in years. "Sweetheart, you scared us." She set a bouquet of lilies on the table, white petals opening in the bright light. To anyone else, it might have seemed tender. To me, it looked like a shroud. Alex leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't have gone outside in that weather," he said smoothly, as if it had been my choice. "You've got to be more careful." My throat tightened around words I could not yet speak. I watched them perform, one pretending concern, the other pretending innocence. But beneath the layers of false care, I saw panic flicker. They thought I was weak. They thought I would stay silent like always. They didn't know that silence had died in the snow along with the girl they tried to bury. When they stepped into the hallway, I closed my eyes and listened. The thin hospital walls carried voices. "If she talks," Alex muttered, his tone low and sharp, "we're finished. She won't." Donna replied, her voice steady. "She knows better. She always has." My pulse quickened. The words sliced through me like ice, but instead of freezing me, they lit a spark. For the first time in years, I wasn't just absorbing pain. I was gathering proof. Slowly, with trembling hands, I reached under my blanket for my phone. I had hidden it beneath the pillow, still clumsy from the cold, but the recording app was simple. One tap and their voices were mine. I let it run as their conversation drifted, catching every syllable. My heart pounded not from fear, but from purpose. When they finally left, I exhaled, shaky but fierce. The old Hannah would have cried herself back to sleep. The new Hannah pressed stop, saved the file, and whispered, "This is the start." Later that afternoon, Evelyn Green appeared at my door. She looked older than I remembered, her hair silver, her hands rough from years of gardening, but her eyes were steady, kind. She carried no flowers, no false smiles. She carried truth. "I heard them bring you in," she said softly, sitting by my bed. "They said you almost didn't make it." Tears pricked my eyes. "You called. You saved me." Her hand covered mine, warm and firm. I only did what anyone should do. "But Hannah," she hesitated, searching my face. Was it an accident? The silence between us stretched. For the first time, I felt the weight of a decision. To stay quiet or to speak. My voice shook, but it came out clear. "No." Alex dragged me outside. Donna watched. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I knew it. I've seen things over the years. The shouting, the bruises you tried to hide. I should have done more." "You did enough," I whispered. "You believed me." Her eyes glistened. Then I'll do more now. Whatever you need. Hope swelled in my chest, fragile but real. For so long I had been invisible, unheard. Now I had an ally. That evening, Dr. Hartman came by with a clipboard. He checked my vitals, then sat down, his expression grave. Hannah, I need to be clear. Your injuries don't match an accident. You have frostbite on your hands, abrasions consistent with pounding on wood, hypothermia from prolonged exposure. If anyone tells me you slipped outside by mistake, I will not write that report. I blinked back tears. You believe me? I believe evidence, he said firmly. And I believe survivors. The word echoed in me. Survivor, not victim. Survivor. By the next day, Detective Laura Sanchez from the Rochester Police Department visited. She was calm, professional. Her dark hair pulled back, her badge clipped to her belt. She asked gentle but pointed questions. Do you remember how you ended up outside? Did anyone see? My throat was raw, but I forced the words out. Alex dragged me. Donna watched. I begged them. They left me there. Detective Sanchez studied me in silence, then nodded slowly. We'll look into it. Something in her gaze told me she understood more than she said aloud. She had seen families like mine before. She knew what silence could hide. When she left, I lay back against the pillows, my phone clutched in my hand. On it was the recording of Donna and Alex, their careless whispers about finishing me. It wasn't much, but it was a seed. Combined with Evelyn's testimony, with Dr. Hartman's report, with my own words, it was enough to begin. For years, I had been forced to live as a ghost in my own home. Now, lying in a hospital bed, bruised and scarred, but alive, I realized I had more power than I ever thought possible. Not strength in fists or in shouting, but strength in proof, in allies, in truth. The storm had not destroyed me. It had revealed me. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would come next. 1 week after the storm, I walked into the Rochester Community Center with my hands still wrapped in bandages and my body weak from the fight to survive. But my steps were steady. The cold of that night still lived in my bones, yet a different fire pushed me forward now. I was not just showing up for myself. I was showing up for every invisible voice that had been drowned out by family silence. Evelyn walked beside me, her scarf wrapped tight against the evening chill. You don't have to do this tonight, she whispered, worry in her voice. Yes, I do, I answered. If I wait, they'll bury it again. The center's hall had been arranged with rows of folding chairs. Neighbors I had known since childhood filed in their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Some had seen bruises before and said nothing. Some had heard the shouting through thin winter air. Now they were about to see what silence had cost. A few local reporters had come tipped off by Evelyn. And a cousin of mine, Ruby, had agreed to set up her phone for a live stream. At the back of the hall, Donna and Alex arrived together. Donna wore a dark coat and her best pearls, her chin lifted high as if daring anyone to question her. Alex looked smug, his shoulders squared as though he had already won. They believed this meeting was a chance to control the narrative, to tell the community I had wandered outside in some confused accident. They thought their image could survive anything. The murmurs quieted as Detective Laura Sanchez stepped forward, her voice calm. Thank you for coming. Tonight is about truth. Hannah Miller has something to share. My knees shook as I stood, but I faced the room, my eyes sweeping across the crowd. For years I was told to stay silent. For years I was told that what happened to me was my fault. A week ago, that silence almost killed me. My throat tightened, but I pressed on. I was not careless. I did not wander outside. I was dragged into the snow by Alex Carter while Donna Carter watched. Gasps rippled through the room. Donna's smile stiffened, but she stayed seated, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I nodded to Ruby, who pressed play on the screen at the front. From the speakers, Alex's voice filled the hall. If she talks, we're finished. The words echoed like a confession carved into stone. Then Donna's voice followed, calm and cold. She won't. She knows better. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Some turned to glare at Donna and Alex, others stared at me with wide eyes. Donna shot to her feet. This is out of context, she shouted, her polished voice cracking. She's twisting our words. Sit down, Donna Evelyn called from the front row, her voice steady. We've all seen enough of your twisting. I held up my bandaged hands. Do these look like an accident? Do these look like a mistake? Photos flashed on the screen. My frost-bitten fingers, bruises across my arms, the medical report signed by Dr. Hartman. His clinical voice followed in a recorded statement. These injuries are consistent with forced confinement in freezing temperatures. They are not consistent with accidental exposure. The evidence was undeniable. Murmurs turned to outrage. A woman in the back shouted, "How could you—" A man near the front shook his head, muttering, "We should have said something years ago." Donna's face drained of color. Alex tried to rise, fists clenched, but Detective Sanchez stepped forward, her presence calm but immovable. "You're not going to intimidate anyone tonight." As if the scene wasn't explosive enough, Ruby's live stream had already drawn hundreds of viewers. Comments scrolled across her phone screen so fast she could barely keep up. Lock them up! Justice for Hannah! How could a mother allow this? With every second, the number climbed into the thousands. The silence that had smothered me for years was shattering in real time, replaced by a roar that spread far beyond those four walls. Donna tried again, her voice shrill now. "This is family business. You don't air this to the world." I lifted my chin. "No, Donna, this is attempted murder, and the world deserves to see the truth." Gasps filled the hall, followed by applause. Hesitant at first, then swelling. Evelyn rose and spoke, her voice trembling with conviction. "I saw her lying there in the snow. I heard her cries through the storm. And I will swear on my husband's grave this girl would be dead if I hadn't called." Reporters scribbled furiously. Microphones stretched forward. Donna's carefully built facade cracked further with each passing second. Alex muttered curses under his breath, his smugness gone. By the time the live stream ticked past 10,000 viewers, the story had already spread across social media. Hashtags popped up. Justice for Hannah /End Family Silence. Local journalists were posting clips before the meeting even ended. I looked directly into the camera. I was supposed to disappear quietly. They counted on silence. But silence doesn't protect the abused. It protects the abusers. I will not stay silent anymore. The hall erupted in applause. Some stood clapping. Others shouted words of encouragement. For the first time, I wasn't just Hannah the scapegoat. I was Hannah the survivor. Hannah the witness. Hannah the voice that could not be ignored. Outside, by the time the meeting ended, local news crews were waiting. Bright lights blinded me as microphones clustered close. "Hannah, do you believe your brother meant to kill you? What do you want to see happen next?" I spoke clearly, my voice steady. "I want accountability, I want justice, and I want the world to know that silence is not survival." That night, when I returned to Evelyn's house, the live stream had been shared over 20,000 times. News outlets were replaying clips. Neighbors who had once looked away were leaving messages of support. Even people I didn't know were writing, "I survived abuse too. Thank you for speaking. You're not alone." Donna and Alex had come to the community center believing they could spin the story that I would falter under pressure. Instead, their lies collapsed under the weight of evidence, witnesses, and public fury. For the first time, I felt the full force of what it meant to be seen. Not mocked, not silenced. Seen. And I knew this was only the beginning. 2 months after the night at the community center, I walked up the stone steps of the Olmsted County District Court in downtown Rochester with Evelyn at my side. The air was sharp, the sky clear and cold, but this time the chill did not seep into my bones. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras flashing microphones thrust forward, their questions blurred into a single hum, but I kept my head high. I wasn't here to perform. I was here to tell the truth. Inside, the courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, the weight of years of cases lingering in its halls. I sat at the front of the courtroom, my bandaged hands now mostly healed, though stiff from frostbite. Across the room, Alex Carter sat with his defense attorney, his jaw clenched, his eyes locked on me with venom. Donna sat beside her lawyer, her pearls gone, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. They looked smaller now, stripped of the control they once held. The judge entered, robes flowing, and the courtroom rose. Judge Samuel Whitaker, stern and deliberate, took his seat and called the case. State of Minnesota versus Alexander Carter and Donna Carter. The charges were read aloud: attempted murder for Alex's complicity and obstruction of justice for Donna. The words echoed through the chamber, each one a reminder that what they had done could no longer be hidden. The prosecution began by laying out the timeline. Photos of the yard that night, snowbanks piled, high footprints leading from the back door to where I had collapsed. Images of my hands frostbitten and bruised. Medical charts from Dr. Hartman detailing the damage, the near-fatal hypothermia, the 2 minutes my heart had flatlined. The jury leaned forward, their faces sober. Then came the audio recording. Alex's voice low and bitter. "If she talks, we're finished." Donna's calm reply. "She won't. She knows better." The sound filled the courtroom like a confession carved into stone. Alex shifted in his seat, his jaw twitching while Donna stared at the table, her mask of composure cracking. Evelyn took the stand. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was firm. "I heard something that night, a faint pounding through the storm. I told myself it couldn't be real, but when I listened closer, I knew someone was out there. I called 911, and if I hadn't, Hannah would not be alive today." Dr. Hartman followed his testimony, crisp and precise. These were not the injuries of someone who accidentally wandered outside. These were injuries of prolonged exposure, of someone left without protection, someone who fought to get back in. His words carried authority, undeniable and unshakable. The defense tried to counter. Alex's attorney painted me as dramatic, unstable, seeking attention. She resented her stepbrother, resented her stepmother. This was her chance to strike back. Donna's lawyer claimed I had slipped outside in confusion, that I was exaggerating, that the recordings were taken out of context. I sat through every word, my hands clenched in my lap, my chest tight. But when it was my turn, I rose slowly and walked to the stand. The courtroom hushed as I took the oath and sat down, my heart pounding. I looked directly at the jury, not at Alex, not at Donna. I am Hannah Miller. A week before I turned 19, my stepbrother dragged me into the snow while my stepmother watched. They left me there. I begged. I pounded on the door until my hands bled. And when I collapsed, they let me freeze. My voice wavered, but I pressed on. I died for 2 minutes. The doctors brought me back. I should not be here, but I am. And I am telling you the truth. The defense cross-examined, trying to rattle me. "Isn't it true you've had disagreements with your family before? Isn't it true you once tried to leave home?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Because they abused me, because I wanted freedom. That doesn't make me a liar. That makes me a survivor." The attorney pressed again, his voice sharp. "How can you be sure Alex meant to kill you?" I met his gaze, my own steady. "Because he locked the door. Because he smiled while I begged. Because Donna said, 'Maybe this will finally teach her.'" Silence followed, heavy and undeniable. The defense had no answer. For 2 weeks, the trial continued. Witness after witness spoke, neighbors who had seen Alex shove me, relatives who had heard Donna excuse his temper friends from school, who remembered my bruises. Piece by piece, the wall of lies crumbled. When the closing arguments ended, the jury filed out. Hours passed, each tick of the clock a hammer on my nerves. Finally, the foreperson returned. The room rose as the judge asked for the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant Alexander Carter guilty of attempted murder." The words struck like thunder. Alex's face contorted with rage. He cursed under his breath, his fists slamming against the table until bailiffs restrained him. "We find the defendant Donna Carter guilty of complicity and obstruction of justice." Donna's shoulders sagged. For the first time, she looked truly old, her hands trembling, her eyes empty. The judge's voice was firm. "Alexander Carter, you are sentenced to 25 years in prison. Donna Carter, you are sentenced to 15 years. Tears blurred my vision. Evelyn reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. Around us, murmurs spread, some gasping, some nodding in approval. Reporters scribbled furiously. The world would know. When the gavel struck, I felt a weight lift from my chest. Not all of it, some wounds would take years to heal, but enough to breathe without fear. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, microphones swarmed. "Hannah, how do you feel a reporter called?" I looked into the lens, my voice steady though my heart still raced. For the first time, I feel free. Justice doesn't erase the pain, but it shows the world the truth. And that matters. The crowd applauded, strangers clapping for me, for the verdict, for the message that silence could no longer protect abusers. As Alex was led away in handcuffs, spitting words I couldn't hear, and Donna was guided out with her head bowed, I realized they no longer had power over me. Their control had ended the moment I chose to speak, and in that moment I knew the girl who had been dragged into the snow was gone. What remained was someone new. Someone who had survived, someone who had fought back, someone who had won. The day after the verdict, I woke in Evelyn's house to the smell of coffee and the sound of birds chirping outside the frosted window. For a long moment, I just lay there, wrapped in a quilt she had made years ago, letting the quiet soak into me. No shouting from downstairs, no slamming doors, no footsteps pacing with anger. Only silence. And for the first time in my life, silence was not dangerous. It was peace. In the weeks that followed, I lived in Evelyn's spare room, slowly piecing myself back together. My hands were stiff from frostbite. My lungs still fragile from the cold, but each day brought a little more strength. Evelyn fussed over me like the mother I had never truly had. Hot soup blankets warmed by the fire. Gentle encouragement when the nightmares woke me in the dark. Sometimes I cried without knowing why, and she would sit beside me, her hand resting over mine, saying nothing at all. That kind of care was its own language. But healing was not just about safety. It was about rebuilding. And I knew I couldn't hide forever. A month after the trial, I stood in front of a small group at the Survivors of Family Violence meeting in Minneapolis. My palms were damp, my voice unsteady, but I began. "My name is Hannah. I almost died in the snow because my family decided I didn't matter. But I'm still here." Gasps and nods rippled through the circle. Women reached out, some with tears in their eyes, some with quiet strength etched into their faces. One whispered, "Me too." And in that moment, I felt less alone than I ever had. Sharing became part of my healing. I spoke at schools, at churches, even at community centers, like the one where my truth first broke through. I learned to steady my voice, to hold eye contact, to carry the weight of my story without letting it crush me. Each time I spoke, someone approached afterward with trembling hands or hushed words. I went through the same. I finally left. Your story gave me courage. Their words stitched a new kind of strength into me. Meanwhile, I applied to the University of Minnesota Duluth, enrolling in culinary arts. It had been my dream once, long before Donna shredded my application. Now, with Evelyn cheering me on and Ruby lending support, I reclaimed it. The first time I stepped into the culinary classroom, the smell of onions and garlic sizzling on pans, the clang of knives against cutting boards, I felt something bloom inside me. Cooking was no longer servitude, it was mine again. At first, every stir of the pot carried ghosts, Alex's criticism, Donna's sighs. But gradually, the kitchen transformed into sanctuary. I cooked for classmates, for Evelyn, for friends I made in the survivors group. We laughed over burnt rolls and celebrated over perfect loaves. Food became healing, not punishment. 1 year after that night in the snow, I stood on the balcony of my small apartment in Duluth, watching flakes drift through the air. The cold no longer terrified me. It reminded me of where I had come from and what I had survived. I had started a small YouTube channel, Hannah's Table. At first, it was just cooking tutorials, but soon I wove my story into them. "This soup won't kill you," I would say with a small smile. "It will heal you." My subscribers grew steadily. Many survivors themselves, many just drawn to the warmth behind the recipes. In the comments, people wrote, "You gave me courage to speak." My daughter watched this with me and finally told me the truth. I believe you. Those messages meant more than numbers ever could. The world still whispered sometimes. Critics online wrote that I was dramatic, that I was milking my trauma for attention. but I had learned to measure my worth differently. For every cruel word, there were dozens of kind ones. For every shadow, there was light. Evelyn became family in the truest sense. On Sundays, we cooked together in her kitchen, filling it with laughter and the smell of bread. Ruby visited often, our bond stronger now than ever. She admitted her regrets how she had looked away when we were younger, but I told her we were both trapped in that web. Now we were free together. I still saw Dr. Hartman sometimes. He came to one of my talks at a local high school, standing quietly in the back until afterward when he shook my hand. I've seen many survivors, he said, his eyes kind, but few who turn survival into purpose. You should be proud. Detective Sanchez checked in too. Cases like yours remind people why speaking up matters, she told me. You didn't just survive, you helped others. As seasons changed, so did I. The girl who had once whispered into her pillow, "You're not crazy," was gone. In her place was a woman who could stand before a crowd and say, "Silence is not survival." On the anniversary of my survival, I returned to Rochester. Evelyn and I drove past the old house. Snow covered the yard, the fence, the garage where the door had once slammed behind me. The house was empty now, foreclosed after the trial. It looked small, hollow, stripped of its power. I walked to the back door, placed my hand on the cold handle. For a moment, I closed my eyes, remembering the pounding, the begging, the sound of my own breath fogging in the dark. Then I whispered, "You didn't win," and I let go. That night, I lit a single candle on my apartment windowsill. The flame flickered gently against the winter glass. I thought of Dr. Hartman's words, "Don't waste this chance," and I knew I hadn't. I had survived. I had spoken. I had built a life not defined by fear, but by freedom. My scars remained, but they no longer shamed me. They were proof of what I had endured and what I had overcome. As the snow fell quietly outside, I whispered to myself, I am alive, I am free, and I am not afraid of the cold anymore. When I look back on everything that has happened, I sometimes wonder how I managed to keep breathing through nights that felt endless. I think of the snow pressing against my skin, of the silence in that freezer of a backyard, of the moment my heart stopped in a hospital room at 3 in the morning. And then I remember the faces. The nurse who shouted that I was gone, the doctor who refused to give up, the neighbor who called the police, the stranger online who typed, "You are not alone." Those faces, those voices became part of the reason I am here speaking to you now. I know that somewhere out there someone is listening to my story and feeling the same shiver of recognition I once felt when I heard others speak about their pain. Maybe you are sitting in a quiet room, phone in your hand, and you know the weight of silence too well. Maybe you grew up in a house where one person's anger ruled every moment. Maybe you were told again and again that your voice did not matter. Or maybe you know someone who has been walking that same road, someone who hides their bruises behind long sleeves and their tears behind practiced smiles. If that is you, I want you to know that there is a way forward. It may not be easy, it may not come quickly, but survival can turn into freedom, and freedom can turn into healing. That is why I continue telling my story even when it hurts, because stories create bridges. They make us realize that we are not as alone as our abusers wanted us to believe. Every time I read a comment that says, "I went through this too," or "You gave me courage to speak," I know that the pain I carried is being turned into something larger than myself. That transformation gives me strength, and it can give you strength too. So I ask you, if you are listening and you feel moved, do not let this just be a story that passes through your screen and fades away. Let it be a spark. Share it with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible. Comment if you have ever carried a silence of your own. Tell us where you are watching from, because together we can build a map of voices that stretch farther than any single story. And if you want to keep walking with me through these stories, if you want to see more, then subscribe. Not just for me, but for the message that no one deserves to disappear in the cold. When I first told my truth, I expected rejection. Instead, I found community. People I had never met stood with me when my own family had abandoned me. That is what this space can be for you too. A gathering place for people who know that family is not defined by blood, but by care. A place for those who believe that justice matters even when it is painful. a place where silence is broken and stories breathe. I will be honest with you. Healing is not a straight road. Some nights I still wake with the echo of that door slamming shut with the sound of the padlock clicking closed. Some days the cold wind still makes me flinch. But then I remind myself of how far I have come, of how far we can all come. The truth is, healing is not about forgetting. It is about learning to live with the memory without letting it own you. And each time I sit down at this table to tell another story, I feel that weight grow lighter. If you are older, if you are in your 50s or 60s or beyond, you may know too well the kind of silence I speak of. Perhaps you grew up in a time when family matters were never spoken aloud, when abuse was hidden behind closed doors and covered with polite smiles. Maybe you have carried decades of silence. I want you to hear me clearly. It is never too late to speak. It is never too late to find healing. And sometimes healing begins with listening to someone else's story and saying, I recognize myself in that. That is why your presence here matters. You are part of this circle now. The snow almost claimed me, but it did not. Instead, it gave me a second chance, and with it, a responsibility. A responsibility to use my voice. A responsibility to make sure the next Hannah, the next person locked in silence, sees that survival is not the end, but the beginning. And I cannot do that alone. I need you with me. Every comment, every share, every subscription is more than a number. It is another voice saying, I believe you. I stand with you. That is how movements are born, not from one voice, but from many joining together. So as you listen to this now, I want to leave you with a challenge. Think of one person in your life who needs to hear this. Maybe it is a friend, maybe a neighbor, maybe even a younger version of yourself who still lives somewhere inside you. Share this story with them. Let it be the key that cracks open the silence. And then tell me in the comments, who are you sharing this with? Let's make this more than content. Let's make it a conversation. I will keep telling these stories. Stories of survival, stories of courage, stories that remind us that even in the darkest cold, there is light waiting. But I need you to keep listening, to keep speaking, to keep building this circle wider. Together, we can make sure no one has to freeze in silence again. When I stand on my balcony now watching snow fall on the city lights, I no longer feel fear. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for Evelyn who called. Gratitude for Dr. Hartman who refused to give up. Gratitude for every stranger who typed words of support when I thought no one cared. And gratitude for you who are here now, still listening. So let's not end it here. Let's carry it forward. Like this video if it touched you. Subscribe so you can keep walking this journey with me. Share it with someone who needs it. And most of all, speak. Tell your story even if your voice shakes. Because silence is not survival. Speaking is. I will be here waiting for you every time the snow falls and every time the sun rises. Because together we can turn survival into strength and strength into healing.